Mark, this was a senior night event with high school hockey players from all across the state of Rhode Island. Unfortunately, what started as a celebration ended in tragedy.
On the 16th of February 2026, a routine high school hockey game at the M Lynch Arena in Pawtucket turned into tragedy when shots rang out inside the rink, killing 3 people and injuring 3 others. Police say the suspected shooter has been identified as Robert K Dorgan, 56, a North Providence resident and father of a hockey player attending the game. Officers believe the violence stemmed from a family dispute rather than random criminal activity, with early evidence suggesting several victims were relatives of the gunman. The carnage unfolded at about 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just minutes into the match between co-op high school teams, when the suspect allegedly opened fire from the stands. Eyewitness footage and live-stream video capture players and fans scrambling for cover as at least a dozen shots echo through the arena and spectators flee in panic. Emergency responders and law enforcement arrived within minutes. They found multiple victims suffering from gunshot wounds. 2 adults reportedly died from their injuries, and 3 people were rushed to hospital in critical condition. The suspect, Dorgan, was later found dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, leading authorities to classify the incident as a murder-suicide. Officials also say a bystander attempted to intervene and disarm the shooter, a moment that may have shortened the duration of the attack and prevented further loss of life. Community reaction was immediate and profound. Coaches, family members, lawmakers, and city officials expressed shock that a place known for youth sports and family gatherings could be transformed into a scene of violence in a matter of moments. State leaders called the incident a horrific tragedy and reaffirmed commitments to cooperation between local and federal investigators as the inquiry continues. This is the story of a hockey game that devolved into bloodshed. A father who allegedly turned on his own family during a pitch meant for celebration, and a Rhode Island community grappling with loss and questions about how such violence could erupt in a space meant for unity and sportsmanship. On the 17th of February 2026, what was meant to be an ordinary youth hockey game in Pawtucket turned into one of the most disturbing mass violence incidents in Rhode Island's recent history. Inside the M Lynch Arena, a space normally filled with the sounds of skates on ice and cheering parents, gunfire erupted from the stands, leaving 3 people dead, including the shooter, and multiple others wounded. Police later identified the gunman as Robert K Dorgan, 56. Authorities say Dorgan opened fire during the youth hockey game before turning the weapon on himself, in what investigators have classified as a murder-suicide. The violence unfolded in seconds, but left consequences that will linger for years. According to law enforcement officials, the shooting began shortly after the game had started. Families, players, and coaches were present, many of them seated in the stands just feet from where the gunman was positioned. Without warning, shots rang out, sending spectators scrambling for cover as players fled the ice in panic. Some parents shielded their children with their bodies, while others ran for exits. First responders were dispatched within minutes. Officers from the Pawtucket Police Department, along with Rhode Island State Police and emergency medical crews, rushed to the arena. Inside, they encountered chaos, injured victims, overturned seats, and stunned witnesses struggling to comprehend what had just happened in a place meant for children and sport. Authorities confirmed that 3 people died as a result of the shooting. 2 were victims of gunfire, and the 3rd was Dorgan himself, who was found deceased from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Several other individuals were wounded and transported to hospital, some in critical condition during the initial response. Investigators later revealed that the shooting was not random. Early evidence suggested that the victims were connected to the shooter through family relationships. Police stated that Dorgan was the parent of a youth hockey player involved in the game, and that the incident stemmed from a domestic-related dispute rather than gang activity or indiscriminate violence. However, officials cautioned that the full motive was still under investigation. One of the most significant details to emerge was the role of a bystander who attempted to intervene. Police said an adult spectator rushed toward Dorgan during the attack, attempting to stop him. Investigators believe this act of courage may have prevented further loss of life, shortening the duration of the shooting before Dorgan took his own life. As the arena was cleared, law enforcement locked down the surrounding area. Parents were reunited with children in designated safe zones, many in tears. Some families waited hours for confirmation that their loved ones were unharmed. Counselors and victim support teams were deployed to assist those traumatized by witnessing the violence. The M Lynch Arena, a long-standing community facility in Pawtucket, became an active crime scene. Yellow police tape encircled the building as forensic teams documented evidence, reviewed seating layouts, and began analyzing surveillance footage. Every movement inside the arena was reconstructed to understand how the gunman entered, where he was seated, and how the attack unfolded. In the hours that followed, Rhode Island officials addressed the public. State leaders described the shooting as a horrific and unthinkable tragedy, particularly because it occurred at a youth sporting event. The governor and local officials expressed condolences to the victims' families and praised first responders for their rapid action. The incident sent shockwaves through Rhode Island's tight-knit hockey community. Youth leagues across the state suspended games temporarily, and many arenas lowered flags or observed moments of silence. Coaches and parents spoke openly about fear, grief, and disbelief that such violence could erupt in a space built around teamwork and development. From an investigative standpoint, the case quickly moved into a detailed reconstruction phase. Detectives examined how Dorgan was able to bring a firearm into the arena, whether security procedures were in place, and whether any warning signs had been missed. Officials emphasized that while the incident appeared isolated, it raised broader concerns about safety at public youth events. The question of prevention quickly surfaced. Domestic violence experts noted that family-related disputes can escalate unpredictably, particularly when firearms are accessible. While investigators have not released full background details, they confirmed that the shooting was rooted in personal conflict, rather than ideology or criminal enterprise. For the families of the victims, the days following the shooting have been marked by unimaginable grief. Funerals were planned, while investigations continued. Children who witnessed the violence were offered trauma counseling, and schools coordinated with mental health professionals to support students affected by the incident. The shooting also reignited national discussions about gun safety in public spaces, particularly venues involving children. Lawmakers faced renewed pressure to examine security measures at community facilities, and the broader issue of firearm access in domestic conflict situations. As the investigation continued, officials reiterated that Robert K. Dorgan acted alone and that there was no ongoing threat to the public. They acknowledged that the emotional impact of the attack would be long-lasting, not just for Pawtucket, but for families across Rhode Island, who attend youth sporting events believing them to be safe. What remains undeniable is the scale of the loss. A youth hockey game became the setting for a murder-suicide. 2 victims lost their lives. Several others were injured. Children and parents were forced to witness violence that no sporting event should ever contain. This case is not just about what happened inside an ice rink on a February afternoon. It is about how personal conflict can erupt into public tragedy, how quickly joy can turn to terror, and how communities are left to pick up the pieces afterward. As authorities continue to examine the circumstances that led to the shooting, Pawtucket is left mourning and questioning how such a tragedy was possible in a place built for youth, sport, and community. As the shock of the Pawtucket hockey rink shooting began to settle, Rhode Island found itself confronting a tragedy that cut far deeper than a single crime scene. What unfolded inside the M Lynch Arena on 17 February 2026 was not only an act of violence, but a rupture of trust in places long considered safe: youth sporting events, family spaces, and community gathering points. In the days that followed, investigators worked methodically, while families, players, and an entire state struggled to process the unimaginable. Authorities confirmed that Robert K. Dorgan, 56, acted alone. Police believe the shooting was rooted in a domestic family dispute, with victims connected to the gunman through personal relationships. While officials have withheld some details out of respect for the families and ongoing reviews, they were clear on one point: this was not a random act of mass violence. It was targeted, personal, and devastatingly public. Inside the arena, the physical aftermath told a grim story. Investigators mapped bullet trajectories, seating positions, and movement patterns during the shooting. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts were synchronized to reconstruct the sequence of events, second by second. This level of reconstruction is standard in cases of mass casualty incidents, not only to establish facts, but to answer a critical question: could the loss of life have been even greater? Police say the answer may lie in the actions of a bystander who attempted to intervene. According to investigators, an adult spectator rushed toward Dorgan during the attack, trying to stop him. While the full details of that encounter remain under review, authorities believe this act of courage likely shortened the duration of the shooting. For the victims' families, however, those distinctions offer little comfort. 2 innocent people lost their lives at a youth hockey game, a setting that should have been defined by teamwork and growth, not fear. Several others were wounded, physically and emotionally. Mental health professionals were quickly mobilized across Pawtucket and neighboring communities. Schools, youth leagues, and counseling centers coordinated to provide trauma support. Experts warn that exposure to such events can have lasting effects, including anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and fear associated with public spaces. Early intervention, they stress, is critical to long-term recovery. The Rhode Island hockey community responded with an outpouring of solidarity. Games were paused, moments of silence were observed. Teams wore black armbands, and rink entrances filled with flowers, jerseys, and handwritten messages. Coaches spoke to young players not about winning or losing, but about safety, feelings, and the importance of speaking up when something feels wrong. At the state level, officials faced urgent questions. How did a firearm enter a youth sports venue? What security measures were in place, if any? Could warning signs have been identified earlier? While investigators have not suggested systemic failure at the arena itself, the incident reignited debate over security protocols at community facilities. Domestic violence experts were careful to contextualize the tragedy. They emphasized that family-related disputes can escalate unpredictably, especially when firearms are accessible. Law enforcement leaders reiterated that prevention requires more than policing. It involves early reporting, risk assessment, and cross-agency communication between courts, social services, and community organizations. For Pawtucket residents, the shooting altered how everyday life feels. Parents described hesitating before dropping children at practices. Spectators scanned exits at games. Familiar routines were suddenly marked by vigilance. This psychological shift, where safety is questioned in places once taken for granted, is one of the most enduring impacts of public violence. Investigators also examined how the incident was communicated in real time. Live-stream footage of the game, which captured moments of panic, spread rapidly online before authorities could respond. Officials later urged the public to be mindful about sharing graphic content, noting that such footage can re-traumatize victims and complicate investigations. As the case was formally classified as a murder-suicide, authorities confirmed there was no ongoing threat to the public. Yet they acknowledged that the questions raised would not disappear with the closing of the investigation. Legislative discussions began to surface around firearm access, mental health intervention, and security standards at public venues. National attention soon followed. A youth hockey game, an environment associated with development, discipline, and community, had become the backdrop for lethal violence. For the families of the victims, grief unfolded away from cameras. Funerals were held, lives remembered not by how they died, but by who they were. Friends spoke of kindness, dedication, and ordinary moments that now carried extraordinary weight. These personal stories, often overshadowed by headlines, are the true measure of loss. Community leaders in Pawtucket emphasized healing alongside accountability. They called for compassion, support for those affected, and sustained attention to the root causes of violence. Vigils were not only acts of mourning, but of resolve, statements that the community would not allow fear to define its future. In the weeks after the shooting, youth leagues gradually resumed play. The return was cautious, marked by enhanced security and open conversations between coaches, parents, and players. While some families chose to step back, others saw participation as an act of resilience, a refusal to surrender shared spaces to violence. What happened at the M Lynch Arena will remain part of Rhode Island's history. It is a case that underscores how personal crises can erupt into public tragedy and how quickly normal life can fracture. It also highlights the courage of individuals who act under unimaginable pressure and the resilience of communities forced to rebuild trust. Ultimately, the Pawtucket shooting is not just a story about Robert K Dorgan or a single afternoon in February. It is a reminder of the human cost of unresolved conflict, the vulnerability of communal spaces, and the responsibility shared by institutions and individuals alike to recognize warning signs and intervene before violence occurs. As Rhode Island continues to mourn, the hope expressed by many is that the lessons drawn from this tragedy will lead to stronger safeguards, better support systems, and a renewed commitment to protecting the spaces where children learn, play, and grow. If you value accurate, in-depth reporting that goes beyond headlines, like this video to support responsible journalism. Share it so these stories are told with truth and care. and subscribe for more cinematic, fact-checked investigations into the cases shaping our world.